Throughout history, political authority was thought to be centered in the hands of one individual or a small group of individuals who were a part of an elite caste in society. And oftentimes this narrative came with a sort of religious kind of backing where the individuals in power were somehow anointed by God, or if they were not anointed by God, they were anointed by familial bloodline, by caste, or some other arbitrary characteristic that has absolutely nothing to do with the soundness of that political arrangement. And this was really the case in a lot of political history, and it is the case in some places today in the world, until the founding of America. America was so different because America said status and bloodline and caste and divine right, the false category of divine right, are not where power justly comes from, but rather power comes from those who power is being enacted upon the governed, because they, in being equal human beings in a moral sense, have an inalienable right to consent to things that are being done to them. And this was the kind of political and moral and social revolution that the American civilization is a fundamental example of. So it is quite curious that this is the fact when you hear certain murmurings in the political conversation calling for an American Caesar, indeed. If you've been on the internet or you've been in certain parts of the political conversation on social media, you may have heard people lusting almost for a strongman, to come in and take control of America and to beat back some of the cultural vanguard forces that have unfortunately inflicted a great deal upon us, mostly from the left. And these people have self-selected Baron Trump to be this person. Now, while I think this is absolutely 100% ridiculous, and I give no credence to this idea that Baron Trump is going to be this kind of Caesarian figure, even though he does have cool hair and even though all that is true, I think the phenomenon of people in a country built upon rejecting established hierarchies of unaccountable authority, wanting that same kind of system to come to our country, is actually quite fascinating and is quite dangerous. This comes, I think, from a deep distrust that so many people on the right have of the American Constitution. Oftentimes when I invoke the Constitution, or when people like me invoke the Constitution in political arguments, people will say, and I've noticed this increasingly, Christian, the Constitution is not applicable. Christian, the Constitution has not been followed for a very, very long time. Many people who are more on the libertarian side will tell me blatantly, Christian, your Constitution means nothing to me, it's a piece of paper. And those who are on the more anti-libertarian side would say to me, Christian, the Constitution has failed in stopping the production of certain social outcomes that we see today, whether it be the annihilation of womanhood, whether it be the transing of children, whether it be the kind of hijacking of social institutions and gearing them towards political ends, whether it be the prominence of diversity, equity, and inclusion and the ideologies around that. Regardless of what it is, people will argue the presence of these things in our society are fundamentally failures of the Constitution. And therefore, we need to have a Caesarian figure, a strong man to come in and correct the course where the Constitution supposedly has messed up. And this is the great folly of our age. That could potentially lead, not just to the destruction of American civilization, which is one thing, it could potentially lead to the loss of the radical experimentation in philosophy and political organization that America was, that has inspired so many more people around the world to seek the upper reaches of their human potential. If we're going to understand this idea and deal with it fully, as I intend to in this video, we must also understand what this idea looks like. This idea looks like abandoning the principles of American civilization in favor for older principles that may predate America, that are seen in ways that are able to instill more social order. The same people who criticize the Constitution on these grounds will oftentimes exalt people like Francisco Franco. They'll exalt people like Mussolini. They'll exalt strongmen. They may even exalt modern-day strongmen like Xi Jinping or Putin, because they believe that those people have been able to wield authority in a manner that preserves their society without realizing that the distinction of America in the world has to do with our ethos being so radically different from the old world organizations that happen in countries that happen to populate the world right now. America is a fundamentally unique point in human history, which is why those examples don't apply. But also, I think it's also even more interesting to understand this. There is this lust for control, for power, for dominance and special treatment amongst a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the status of society today. All those things I just mentioned to you are certainly problems, and I think they are problems that need to be confronted. But so many people have lost sight of themselves, and they've absorbed themselves into this abstract notion of what they believe society should be, what they believe American society should be, and they have surrendered themselves to this new false god of authoritarianism that comes in the name of cultural and national salvation. The truth is this, my friends, the Constitution does not enable ideologies that are fundamentally opposed to the Constitution by necessity. The Constitution allows people to use their inherent moral quality of freedom and use their inherent moral quality of reason to organize socially and politically within their own homes and within the state houses of their places to direct the course of their society. Now, people may abuse this, and people may use this in a way that is destructive. But if someone gets into a brand new truck and wrecks the truck, do you blame the truck or do you blame the person who wrecked the truck? Fundamentally, the critiques of the Constitution and the attempt to move beyond the Constitution has little to do with the Constitution and more to do with the loss of introspection and a loss of self-esteem amongst the masses that then causes them to place their hope not in God, not in reason, not in anything like that, but in some political force that is supposed to correct everything. But problems of the heart cannot be solved by problems of force because categorically those are two different things. If an American Caesar were to arise, my friends, and I'm defining an American Caesar as a sort of a dictatorial figure who manages to overcome the checks and balances of the American system and to consolidate power and then wield power to crush his foes, as so many people who have been proposing this idea have wanted. If an American Caesar were to arise, my friends, that would mean an undermining of the classic Republican structure of our civilization. And it would also mean the undermining of the principles necessary to ensure that a civilization can remain morally just and prosperous. You cannot have a morally just civilization in the absence of the ability to express yourself without reprisal from authority. You cannot have a morally just civilization where justice is simply a matter of power struggles and merely a matter of personal vendettas rather than a first principles idea rooted in preserving the qualities that we all possess that enable society to exist in the first place. You can't have a morally just society when power is seen as a goal, as an end goal, not a means in and of itself, and where power is seen to be morally intelligible as opposed to being simply a tool that has no moral intelligibility but can be used in moral or immoral ways. That is what an American Caesar would do. Now, this is not necessarily a forlorn reality. If we look, for example, at the example of Huey Long, who himself was a despot back in the 20s and 30s in American history, who consolidated power in Louisiana as governor, who bullied people, who used the licensing system to cancel his own political foes, who used so many different assets under his control, from legislators that he bought off from executive orders to increase his iron fist over Louisiana. That was the example of what could be an American Caesar. Someone manipulating the Republican processes of their state, filling them with sycophants, and then engineering the law in a manner that deviates from the purpose of the law and more goes towards the specific desires of that individual. Hence, the rise of an American Caesar. This idea is dangerous and inimical to our structure of government. It is dangerous and inimical to the safety of the individual, and it is dangerous and inimical, I believe, to the ethos of who we are as a civilization. Now, if the argument is that America as a civilization has failed, and therefore we need to ditch America, that's a different argument. That's one that can be more readily opposed. But if the argument is, which it has been, that to save America, you must use authoritarianism and brute force against your enemies, then it falls into the same critique, same problems that I just laid out for you. So many people have been enveloped into a mindset of secular idolatry. I call this the sort of golden calf syndrome. And the idea of an American Caesar feeds this golden calf syndrome, because a Caesar is not simply someone that wields political authority. A Caesar is also an overarching symbol and essence of a particular culture. That's what Caesar in Rome was. He was the embodiment of everything the Roman man was supposed to be. The embodiment of virtue, the embodiment of order, the embodiment of enlightenment. But the problem is, old world societies can have that kind of system because political power, value, and meaning all rest in a single person, and the society flows from the person. But when you're in a new world system where individuals, as virtue of their humanity, not virtue of their status, are seen as valuable and they are enabled through reason, then a single persons can no longer be the single constituent holding together the whole society. Everyone becomes a part of that factor. Meaning no longer flows from one person. Meaning is discovered beyond the social, beyond the political, beyond a single person. The idea of an American Caesar is so fundamentally incompatible with the new world that it might as well be trying to plunge America back into the old world, in which case it wouldn't be America anymore. But most importantly, go back to the golden calf syndrome. So many people want to find a solution, again, outside of themselves, that involves idolizing some kind of person, some kind of authority figure. This is obviously something that's been happening for a very long time. Oftentimes people forget their own power, people forget their own ingenuity, and they outsource all of their thinking, they outsource all of their behavior to a single person. This is reminiscent, again, of what happened with the Israelites in the desert when they were walking from Egypt. They were told by the prophet to wait and have faith that God would deliver them. And they were told by the prophet that he was going to go up to the mountain, and he was going to talk to the source, the divine, the creator, and that they were to stay there until he had come back with instructions. Instead of having faith in that message, instead of having self-restraint, instead of being rational and reasonable, those people, the Israelites, decided they were going to create an idol and put all of their trust in something that was dead before it even was created, a false thing. Too many Americans are putting their trust in false things that are inimical to our own humanity. And this is what an American Caesar is. No one is coming to save you. No single person will ever be able to embody the whole of American culture. We are such a unique civilization that to even suggest that, again, is contradictory to the very structure of our society. But not only this golden calf syndrome has a massive impact on our moral thinking. Because the first principle of moral thinking is that you have to acknowledge the existence of the individual. The second principle of moral thinking is that you must acknowledge the existence of moral qualities the individual possesses, called rights. The third principle of moral thinking is that you have to believe those rights are necessary for a society to exist in the first place. Therefore, the society must be based on those rights. Can I flow? The fourth principle of moral thinking is that a society based on those rights will, in every aspect, reflect those rights. Because if it does not, then the society has no foundation and it lapses into chaos and tyranny. Hobbes was trying to get something like this back in the Leviathan, but he took it the wrong way because he started with the premise that humans were inherently bad and evil and needed authority. That's not the case. Humans don't need authority to make them good. Humans simply need a guiding principle, a set of guiding principles, a hierarchy of values to inform their behavior and their actions, and then everything falls into place because these things are built into our human existence, which then informs our understanding of society. This is why society is fundamentally a human phenomenon, because animals do not have the ability to create civilization because they only have instinct and they lack reason. Therefore, if you reject reason in pursuit of a social change or a political change, you will ultimately destroy society. That is what the golden calf syndrome does. It rejects reason. It rejects that idea that moral thinking and morality comes from outside of the political. It subsumes everything into the political, which leads to a system, a state of moral decay. It's idol worship, a secular form of idol worship that will not do us in this country any good, unfortunately. America was founded off of civic virtue, the rejection of monarchy, the primacy of the individual, natural law, natural rights, consent of the governed, and so many different things that are so wonderfully mighty and have allowed us to be the nation we are, and are very philosophically and morally intelligible, and has allowed us to unlock this kind of human potential and prosperity that is unbeknownst to previous civilizations. And yet this American Caesar idea opposes that because it's fundamentally cynical. It fundamentally believes that those things America is founded upon are no longer applicable and they're no longer useful, and that we must change our strategy in accordance with the times. This is where the conservative in me comes out. I don't believe that we ditch the past because the present happens to be different. I believe that we look at the past, try to glean wisdom from the past, and then most importantly, look at the eternal principles that transcend both past, present, and future, that bind us wherever we are, and apply them to our present. The principles of natural law did not change between 1776 and 2024. The principle of reason did not change between 1776 and 2024. The principle of self-government and consent of the governed has not changed between 1776 and 2024. What has changed is the moral attitudes of our people in this country and our willingness to understand these principles, to enact these principles in our society, and to be true to them. That has changed. And in a republic, you must have a virtuous people for the experiment to succeed. But under an American Caesar, you don't actually get to that virtuous outcome. You get to an outcome of superficial virtue compelled by force, not organic virtue that is sustaining and progresses your civilization. There is not a single civilization in this world that has been sustained solely by force. The ones that tried to do this, whether it be the Mongols under Genghis Khan, whether it be Sparta is one of the most odious examples. The entire structure of their civilization was based on force, based on status, and based on these things. And these civilizations end up dying. They don't stand the test of time. Because human beings, while we may have a sort of violent tendency to us, we're much more than our primal urges. But the American Caesar idea kind of connects to our primal urges and tries to convince us that this should be the default state of society. I say we reject this, we embrace Americanism, and we work with what we have as opposed to trying to try out old world ideas that do not fit in a new world context and fundamentally will end up harming our republic in a way that is just irreparable. My friends, if you like this video, like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. Be sure to donate to me if you want to, which is in my comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive.